Thank you.
Perfect. Well, then I'll start. My name is Darren Campbell. I'm the chair of the committee, and I'm also a radio cab employee representing the companies, the taxi company rep. And I don't see Dan, our vice chair, yet. So why don't we go to Mark, and then Mark, you can pick somebody to go after you, and we'll continue that until we get through the list. How about that?
All right, sounds good. Mark Williams, Portland Bureau of Transportation. Hand it over to Guy.
Hello, everyone. Hi, Guy Ocker. I am a Lyft driver, and I've been doing this since day one in Portland. And then I guess we'll go to
Jamal, why don't you go next?
okay. Sorry, I'm not good at this.
Unmute yourself, though, Jamal.
Sorry about that. My name is Jamal Abdi. I'm the owner of JB Medical Transportation, representing NMT.
Perfect. Carrie? You're on
Carrie,
mute.
you're on mute.
Hi, sorry about that. Carrie McCowan from the Port of Portland Ground Transportation.
Perfect. Dan?
Hi, Dan Lenzen, owner of Dixie Tavern, and thank you for having me here because I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to get people into that entertainment district, which is one of my passions.
Perfect. Nicole?
Nicole Sharon, ADA Title II Disability Equity Manager for the City of Portland, representing the kind of person with disability angle. I can hand it off to Steve.
Steve Hext, public participant.
All right. Jen Armbruster, you want to go next?
Sure. My name is Jen Armbruster. I'm one of the people in the public. I'm totally blind individual, and yeah, glad to be here. I was the one I think Darren was referring to being my first meeting because I missed the last one due to a family emergency. So thanks for having me, everyone.
Perfect. Thank you, Jen. Allison?
Hi, everyone. Allison Ford. I am a public policy manager for Uber, and this is my second meeting, actually. Nice to meet everyone.
Perfect. Thank you, Allison. Abubakar?
Hi, everyone. I am Abubakar Ahmed with Flat Cab, representing taxi drivers.
Perfect. Bobby, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Bobby Schuler, Strategies 360. Our client is Lyft.
Perfect. And who else am I missing? Lori?
Hello, everybody. I'm a Uber driver.
Perfect. And then there's somebody on telephone line with the last 353. Not sure who that is. If Tracy, do you want to? Is that everybody?
Dan Linson is on.
Yeah, he introduced himself.
Oh, okay.
Oh, Dan Mark is just getting on, so as soon as his audio is connected, we'll let him introduce himself.
Darren, can you hear me?
I can now. Go ahead and introduce yourself, Dan.
Yeah, I'm Dan Mark. I own Mark Car Service, Town Car Service here in Portland.
Perfect. Is that it? Tracy, Camarina?
That is it. And if you could move on then to action items.
Let's do it. Let's move to action items. What's our first one?
Tracy, can you allow me to share my screen?
Sure. Okay, it's available.
Thank you. So our first action item is Guy Ocker will submit a topic submission to discuss making an amendment to the Portland City Code that specifies first aid kit and fire extinguisher size type. Guy, I am under the impression that wasn't submitted, but you're still welcome to do that.
Okay, yeah, I would like to submit that.
Great, we'll carry this on to the next meeting then.
Okay.
Action item 9, Mark Williams will review the Portland City Code for shuttle requirements. If trade dress and color schemes cannot be added with this review, he will bring the item back to the committee. So Mark did respond to this via email. So let me share that response. Can everyone see this new screen? Action item 9 response, action item as the same action item I just read. So Mark's response was, currently the code has no specific requirements for shuttle vehicles to be uniform in color or to display a brand or logo. Every shuttle vehicle must promptly display on both sides of the vehicle the following information: the full name of the shuttle company, the company assigned shuttle vehicle number, the telephone number of the shuttle company where services can be requested, and the word shuttle. And that's it for action items. I don't know,
Does
Mark,
it-
if you want to.
Oh, go ahead, Camarina. I was going to say, yeah.
Yeah, if
Go
Mark
ahead.
wanted to elaborate or anybody had questions on Mark's response.
Mark, are you gonna elaborate on that?
Yeah, I was trying to unmute here. Usually the space bar works in Zoom if you hit space bar, but for some reason it didn't operate correctly. I don't really have anything to add. What you see is in code, I think has been that way for many, many, many years. I'm sure those of you that have been around here longer than I have can confirm that. But that's what the code reads now. Shuttle can be any color. There's no color scheme requirement. It just has the requirement for verbiage on the side of the shuttle, very similar to what you see for non-emergency medical transportation.
Is that something that, is there a change happening here, Mark?
No, but when you submitted the topic to go back to the color scheme for taxis, I can't remember who brought it up, but someone suggested, well, shouldn't this apply to shuttles as well? And then my job is to go back and see if the language would be applicable to shuttles. At this point, I would say it would not be unless this committee chooses to make another recommendation.
Perfect. Anybody else have any questions for Mark on that?
And Mark, I do. In there, it does not say that those can be, that it needs to be permanently affixed. So one of the problems is all these magnetic signs that come on and off. Is this something that needs to be permanent on the car, like our decals on the back? Or is it something they can put on a magnet and take on and off?
So we personally, we have not experienced that with shuttles, although I wouldn't doubt that we have some shuttles out there with some magnet signs or stickers on them. The code is fairly silent there. It just says it must display. So if that is a recommendation this committee would like to see go forward, then we would have to include that as a separate recommendation.
Anybody else? Perfect. So are we to number 4 now?
No, we need to go back and approve the July 25th meeting summary,
Oh, okay.
and that would require motion.
Guy, do you want to make a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting? Yeah, unmute.
I make a motion to approve those minutes.
I second it.
Perfect. All in favor? Should we do that? How do you want to do that, Tracy? How are we voting these days?
I would just say if anyone, all in favor, and it's affirmative, and if anyone is opposed, then the same. And usually there's no problems with the summary, and we'll capture the those who are not in favor.
All right, so how about if we just do that? Is anybody not in favor of the passage of the meeting minutes as they were written? So I would take that as a overwhelming yes, that it's good. So now are we going to line 4, the program staff report?
Correct.
Okay, so Mr. Williams, the private hire transportation program staff report A is the learning management system. And for those new people, can you describe the history of that a little bit and what the goals are, as well as an update as to where we're at on it?
Sure, sure. So the learning management system is a new software application that will soon replace the existing, I'm going to say, testing environment. So as a new taxi driver or any private for hire driver comes on board, whether it's an EMT or private for hire, there is a test that the city requires. It's kind of evolved over the years, but there's a test that the city requires that every driver takes prior to, or I'm sorry, within 30 days of receiving their permit, okay? This new application is going to replace that. But the new application also has some additional features. It allows you to take these tests from a mobile device. It allows you to watch videos that are part of a training. And then it will also track all of this information and send drivers reminders, hey, you got a test that's due in, a couple of weeks here and there, so that drivers are always up to date with all of their testing. When we went out and did the research to find a new application with some features, one of the things that we also did is we made a change in code. And the new requirement says that any testing that we put out there, the drivers must complete that test within 30 days, not just upon renewal or not just when receiving a permit. So let me explain when that may come into play. Let's say that there's, I'm making this up as I go, but let's say PBOC puts out new street signs, right? And we feel like it's really important that every driver understands what these new street signs are and what they mean and how drivers should respond or react to them. We can put that out there. The learning management system will go out and notify every driver and say, hey, you have a new course, okay? And then the driver has 30 days to complete that course to learn about the new street signs. Information that's important, that's about safety and things like that. We don't want to wait until the end of the year or wait till the driver renews their permit. We want to get that information out as quickly as possible. And that's what this system will allow us to do. How's that, Darren? Oh, the update, where are we? Where are we with it? Not where I want to be. We have a beta test out there. If anybody here is interested, they can go on there. I can have a link sent to them. Just shoot me a separate email and you can go through the beta test as a Vision Zero test that we put together, a series of videos and some questions to go along with it. One of the things that we learned is that this employee shortage is really affecting the production, or I shouldn't say production, but the configuration and development of a lot of our software applications. They're taking a little bit longer than usual. But I think that we are probably on track to at least have the LMS up and running, hopefully sometime in November.
Perfect. Is there any questions on the learning management system? All right, so then the other line item you have is the driver etiquette training.
Correct. So this is something new, and this will also appear in the learning management system, but it's a little bit of a different approach than our standard curriculum, if you will. What we were hearing in terms of complaints through the ombuds process and just from complaints that we receive internally is that a lot of these complaints really are about the interaction between the driver and the customer. It didn't really have anything to do with the service. It didn't have to do with the driver driving recklessly. It's the interaction. So what this driver etiquette training is designed to do is provide drivers with some simple basic tools as ambassadors to this city of maybe topics you should avoid. For example, it's probably not good to talk about who you're going to vote for when you're with a passenger because your views may be totally different from theirs. And then there's an argument. Next thing you know, Darren at Radio Cab is getting a complaint. Another topic that's probably that you should avoid is talking about your religious beliefs and things like that. So we're going to put together a series of bite-sized videos. And when I say bite-sized videos, They're really meant to be anywhere between 3 and 5 minutes that are going to offer drivers that hopefully some tools to just avoid conversations like that, redirect those conversations to something a little bit more neutral.
Hey, Mark, can you tell us what drivers are you speaking of? I mean, is it taxi, TNC, shuttle, all of the above, or is it limited to?
It's across the board. We get complaints from every sector of the industry. It's across the board. In fact, I was talking to Julie over at Ride Connection, and just coincidentally, they were working on their own similar training. They were calling it something else, but it was really the same thing because they're experiencing this with some of their NEMT drivers. So what we want to do is put our heads together and see if we can combine our resources and get a bigger bang for a buck and put out these videos and maybe put out some additional information. If you have seen our Vision Zero videos, we've gone to the same production company that produced those videos. Those are very well done. And we suspect that these will be just as nice as those, with an actor in there kind of showing you, here's an example of what went wrong, and then that same actor giving you an idea of, here's how you can redirect that and make it right.
Can you tell me, is that training going to incorporate the video we did right before the pandemic regarding, well, Jen was the star of that video, actually. Are there going to be those videos in dealing with people with disabilities as well as all the rest? Is that where that's going to be plugged in?
Yeah, probably will be a separate course, if you will, from the driver etiquette, but we do plan on incorporating that video that we produced, obviously the Vision Zero videos, and I would imagine there's going to be a lot of additional training. So I think that for the industry, I think what you can expect is a lot of additional training once we launch this application. Because it really affords us the technology and the efficiency to do this in an application that should be easily available to all users. When you're waiting at the airport for transportation services, you could log onto your app while you're sitting there and complete 2 or 3 trainings right there as you wait. So I think we're going to see a lot more training in the future. And obviously, if this committee comes together and says, you know what, we really need more training around this particular topic, there should be the opportunity to incorporate new ideas recommended by this committee or the TNC Drivers Committee.
Perfect. Mr. Lenzen, you have a question?
Mark, are you seeing more of this complaints since the pandemic?
I can't say for sure, Dan. I can tell you that for whatever reason, it seems to be at the top of everybody's radar. And I think that's because every company is experiencing a shortage of drivers. So if a driver is, for example, maybe deactivated for some reason, that kind of hurts because we're already short drivers. So what we did notice, though, is with the Umbud service that the TNC drivers have, we were talking to the Umbuds person, and they basically said the majority of their complaints are really about these driver interactions, okay, with the customers. That's number one. Number two, not transporting guide animals for people with disabilities, just saying, no, I don't want a dog in my car. So that's where this type of training will come in handy. Drivers need to understand that they have to transport these animals. But you know, you don't have to transport a snake, obviously, but you need to transport animals that provide a service for people with disabilities. And I don't know why that keeps coming up. You would think that everybody would know that by now, but we're going to put these videos out there just to reiterate that.
Any other questions for Mark in regards to the driver etiquette training?
I don't have a question.
I'm sorry, Guy. So Darren, we have Guy and Bob. Did you raise your hand?
Yeah, I did. I don't know how to press the button
Hold
on
on,
here to
Guy.
raise your hand.
Hold on. Bob, you're muted, but I'm assuming you had your hand raised. Just nod yes or no. No, okay.
No, okay. Guy, go ahead.
Guy,
Okay, I don't have a question. I just have a comment. I think this is a really good idea that we do the videos. And I've always been on my regular job and stuff. There's two things that I just do not like talking about is, and it's come as a Lyft driver, is religion and politics, because we all feel differently on this. And it's funny because there's times where I get people in my car and they talk about other Lyft experiences they've had. And I mean, I hear these stories about how, oh, I got this driver and he talked about, the presidential, and oh boy, he was going on and on and on. He gave pamphlets and I'm just like, wow, So I just think I think it's a good idea that we do this type of video.
perfect. Mark, did you want to say something?
I just want to make one more comment or share one more bit of information. And this is not a official comment or suggestion from PBOT, but the ombuds person did say that a lot of these problems could easily be resolved if the drivers had cameras in their cars. Because when there's a dispute between you and a customer, it's your word against theirs or vice versa. And they've been able to resolve some of these issues when the driver can say, oh no, I never said that to Tracy. Here's our conversation. They provide the video and then it's easily resolved, or at least, the driver at least is working and the truth comes out, if you will. Not my comment officially, but I just want to share that.
Well, and Mark, forgive me if I'm wrong, but there's nothing to prevent a TNC driver from hooking up their own camera, correct?
Correct. There's nothing from a TNC driver, nothing preventing a TNC driver from legally from obtaining their own camera, putting it in their car. I think the TNCs may have in their terms of service saying that if you do choose to do that, you might have to, place the appropriate ORS signage or what have you that's required when you do that. But the same problem also occurs in non-emergency medical transportation vehicles. Another industry that, individual drivers that own their own cars, they may want to invest in a low-cost camera just to have a record of some of those rides. So if a complaint does come up, it too could be easily resolved.
Perfect. Anybody else on these subjects? All right. So this is the time that members of the public have a few minutes to tell the committee whatever they feel like telling us. Is there anybody from the public that wants to make a comment? Mr. Casanelli, you got to take yourself off mute though.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay. Airport drop off. The space that was previously occupied by the COVID tents has largely transferred over to the valet parking. And as a result of that, I'm now seeing cars dropping off 3 lanes out from the curb. And I just don't think that that's safe. And I can tell you, I've been out to the airport 3 times today, and the space in which they have, they move their cones around to take what they determine is appropriate. And I've seen it move 3 times over the course of today. So, I get it. They want room for their cars and so forth, but the way that they sometimes set the cones up, meaning in a straight line across, and again, encroaching into an area that we previously were able to drop off people, is causing more congestion and ultimately could cause an accident or injury.
So Bob, I will tell you that this committee has very little impact on the airport. However, we do have a representative in Cary from the port who could probably talk about that issue if people don't mind me utilizing public input time for a response. Carrie, do you want to respond to Bob's?
So I'm sorry, what was your last name?
Casanelli.
Oh, okay. Did you by chance write an email just a couple of days ago
No.
to the manager? Okay. So we do have a bunch of changes going on the islands. And I do actually have an actual email of those changes. I don't have them memorized, but I would be happy to forward that information to you after the meeting is over.
Okay,
Okay, and what is, do you have a phone number I can call?
sure. It's
Bob, why don't you, in your chat, you can send that
that's
to
true.
her.
okay. Sounds good.
Perfect. Thank you. Anybody else that wants to take part in public comment?
Darren, real quick, Bob, if you could spell your last name for our meeting summary, please.
Sure. It's CASSINELLI.
Thank you.
Perfect. So I'm not hearing anybody else that wants to make public comment. So we will close that line item and move to topic number 7, the topic submission.
Darren, it's item 6 and it's an update.
You're right. I
Yeah.
was trying to skip one. So number 6. So the number 6 is the update on the Fees and Fares Subcommittee. The Fees and Fares Subcommittee is an arm of this group that has been, and it's a combination of the TNC Drivers Committee. So we each have supplied several members of the committees to make up that subcommittee. Right now, we're working on a survey that's going to be sent out to all the TNC drivers to kind of get an idea of where their knowledge and their desires are, and a chance to get some input from those drivers out on the road. We're just about done with that, but there's also probably in the next meeting going to be some topics for this committee to discuss that the subcommittee is going to pass forward. So it is starting to move a little bit better, and hopefully we'll see some action coming out of those. Did I miss anything, Mark? I think we're good.
Yep.
Any questions about the subcommittee? And just for historical purposes, the subcommittee was created to discuss and ensure fairness amongst the drivers and the companies, as well as looking out for public safety. And the fruits of the committee's labor should be realized soon. Any questions? All right. So now let's move on to number 7, topic submission for proper insurance disclosure, Mr. Williams. And by the way, this is the topic submission is for the committee to decide whether or not that's a discussion that we want to move further on. So it's really just looking at the subject and saying, yeah, this committee should deal with it, or no, this committee should not deal with it. So Mark, go for it.
All right, so I'll try not to take too much time, but I think that just having a little context as to why we're doing this, or why PBOT is proposing this, is important for this committee as they consider this to move it forward or not. So the intent in city code, and it clearly states in city code that every company has to have commercial insurance. Every company has to have commercial automobile coverage. Every single company, and we dictate those amounts, those coverage amounts in city code for every company. Although they're a little different with TNCs because there's period 1, 2, and 3, all the companies have a requirement. The intent of city code was that if the driver is involved in an incident while driving for ABC transportation, okay, that driver is in service. The intent was that, okay, that driver should present that company insurance policy so that the insurance policy or the insurance companies can work together to resolve the complaint or resolve the claim, right? It is in city code that every driver has to have a paper copy, although we might be changing that in the future once we get to council. But right now it says every driver must carry a paper copy of the company insurance. That's the reason why, because the city intends for you to present that copy of that company insurance policy if you were involved in a crash with another vehicle while you're working for that company, right? So all of a sudden we have TNCs, and they're in Portland City Code. And then we started to learn about these new, I'm going to call them ride share policies. They've been called a lot of different things, right? And so now TNC drivers or any gig economy driver can go out and get a rider on top of their policy, right? Their existing automobile policy that allows them to provide a level of commercial activity using their personal vehicle. I'm not an insurance person, so I don't know if I'm using all the right terminology, but that's the idea. I'm using my car for business, and when I'm doing that, there's a ride share policy out there that's available that I can purchase on top of my existing personal policy that will cover me or cover my vehicle, depending on how your policy is written, if I'm involved in an accident in my personal car, okay? And I think that I've heard that that policy has come in handy for a few drivers out there that have that. In fact, I believe that most insurance companies out there require gig economy workers to have that type of policy in place or that rider in place if they're using their personal vehicle to provide service. What the code is missing is language that expressly requires you to present the company policy. The intent is there, right? But it doesn't really say that. So what I'm asking the committee to do is consider two things that would revise the relevant sections of code that talk about insurance. Okay, it would if a driver has their own rider policy with them, of course they can present that at the scene of the accident. But additionally, by default, they must also present the company insurance policy. I can't give you one and say, here's all the insurance you need to know about. It's my personal policy. The intent of city code was that you would always present the company policy. This new language would basically make that very clear to drivers.
Perfect. Is there any questions or discussion about this? Mr. Mark?
I have a question, and my question is to Mark. Is period 2, period 3 rideshare insurance equal to, greater than, less than what I have to carry?
I believe period 2 and 3 are the same across the board for all industries. So
1 million, 2 million aggregate?
It's actually not 1 million. It's 1 million at the port. That's why you have to have that higher policy, because you go to the port. I don't have the code right in front of me, but I believe that if you weren't going to the airport, it's $500,000.
I don't think that's correct.
I don't think it is either. I don't think period 2 qualifies in that. I think period 3 is, but period 1 and 2 I don't think is equal to period 3.
And the $500,000, I don't think that's correct either.
I'm going to pull it up.
While Mark's pulling that up, I know that there are several other topic submissions that have been submitted in regards to insurance. And I'm wondering if it wouldn't be in the best interest of this subject to present those all at the same time to the committee as a little bit more of a insurance day, so to speak. Would that make sense, Mark or Tracy?
Mark, I got my insurance certificate pulled up on my phone, and you know, it's $1 million with 2 million aggregate. There's no 500,000 anywhere. And according to my insurance agent, who writes 70% of the insurance in this town, this is what's required by PBOT. Now there's a separate certificate that I have to have for the Port of Portland, and this is the certificate for the City of Portland. So the insurance is not the same for taxi, shuttle, town car, it's different. And, that's another thing that we should address. There's a guy with a company that's got 5 cars that just paid $35,000 for a year's worth of insurance. And I'm sure that would be much less if he could have $500,000 instead of $1 million. And so it's insurance for us small business guys is totally getting out of control. When I first started in 2014, my insurance policy was $2,200. I'm getting ready to sign up for my new insurance policy for 2 cars. That's going to be somewhere north of $9,000 because of all the stuff that I have to carry that no one else has to carry. And the other thing that you have to think of too is that if you're allowing somebody else that does the same job as I do to carry less insurance than I have to carry, you're opening up the city to litigation. Now, I'm not asking that Uber should change its insurance. I'm asking that we should be able to mirror Uber, the insurance that you allow Uber to carry. A little food for thought.
So I misspoke on one thing. The commercial business insurance is 1 million per occurrence and 2 million in aggregate. Okay. However, for the automobile liability coverage, it is 500,000 in city code for every industry except for Uber and Lyft. In periods 2 and periods 3, Uber and Lyft's requirement is $1 million. So all the industries carry more than $1 million in automobile liability because they work at the port. They do business at the port, and the port has that requirement. So they just add that to their policy for the city as well. But for non-emergency medical transportation companies, unless there's a requirement outside of the city of Portland that they're required to carry a higher insurance limits in city code for automobile liability, it's $500,000.
Okay.
All right. Is there any other questions for Mark? So the question before the committee is whether or not we want to continue the conversation in regards to, hold on, I want to get this to correct, proper insurance disclosure amongst private hire drivers. So if there's any other comments on this, or can we just vote to, let's just do this. All those in favor of continuing this conversation and bring the actual topic submission to discussion and a vote, just raise your hand or say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Perfect. It looks like a landslide. So let's move on to number 8, another topic submission form. This one is has been entered by Mr. Dan Mark regarding driving for multiple companies or platforms. Tracy, do you have the, or who's got the info on that one?
It was submitted by Dan Mark, and all of this topic submission, Darren, was sent via email, and it's into the meeting invite for today. And Dan, if there are comments you would like to open up with?
The only thing is that there's taxi cab companies in town that are advertising you can drive for them during the day and for ride share at night. And this has been a problem in the past where there has been major accidents. People have lost their life. And the reason why is because people were driving longer than the required 12 hours. And so I can remember Green Cab, when I worked there, we had to fill out a timesheet and turn that into the city. And we're allowed, to be 12 hours. And 12 hours is a long time to be driving. I mean, if you leave at 6 in the morning, you come back at 6 at night. That's a difficult job driving around town. You hit 2 rush hours. And I can't imagine that you would be sharp driving a taxi all day and then driving it for a ride share at night, or vice versa. And so I think that we should address that this is going on. And I'm not sure how Lyft calculates the time, but from what I'm to understand, Uber calculates your 12 hours only when you got a passenger in the car and the meter's basically running. But the time that you sit around waiting for a fare doesn't really count. Now, taxi, you get a car, when you rent a car or you own a car, you have a shift. Your shift starts at a specific time, whether that would be anywhere from 4 in the morning till 8 in the morning, and you have 12 hours. And I know when I worked at Radio Cab, basically after 12 hours, you were cut off and you had no computer. And without the computer, you can't run any trips and you can't process any credit cards. So it made it very difficult for anybody to go over. Now, the other companies, I don't know if they have the technology that a couple of the big places do. But, I think this is before this becomes a problem and then, Channel 6 has got the microphone in your face. What happened? Where did we go wrong? I think we should address this because there is a ton of this going on. And what's to stop, you get into an Uber car and the majority of the Uber cars you get into have a Lyft sticker in them also. And what's to stop a person from doing 8-10 hours on Uber in a day, 6-7 hours at Lyft during the day? There's nothing to stop that. And so I think this is going to be, I'm sure it's a problem right now. We just haven't figured it out yet. And it's like it's like everything else. It becomes a huge problem when somebody dies. So I think we should address this before somebody dies. That's my 2 cents worth on it.
Does anybody have any questions for Dan or comments on this?
I have a comment.
Go ahead, Guy.
I 100% agree with Dan. My regular job is I am a flight attendant for an airline, and we have some very strict rest rules. Okay, how many hours we could work in a day, how many hours we could work in a week, and even a year. Okay, and of course, the pilots have even stricter rules than the flight attendants do. And I always ask, how would you want to get on an airplane? And if you knew that this pilot has been on duty for, 12 hours for another airline, and then this airline, we're going to take you on vacation. I've been on duty now for 6. You wouldn't want to get on that airplane. And that's the same thing. People are getting in, into they're getting in a taxi or specifically Lyft and Uber. And there are some drivers out there I know that are just working 24 hours straight. Okay, so what I think is this, I agree with Dan, we need to have some sort of rule and some sort of control to do this. And the question is well, how do you do that? Because that's really hard to do. If someone's working for both platforms, Uber and Lyft, how do you just know, So an idea I have is maybe there should be a city code saying you can only work for one rideshare company. You can't be on both platforms. You can't be on Uber and Lyft. You have to pick one, Uber and Lyft. And it's simple. You 12-hour shift, let's say, is the max. And then once you reach at 12 hours, your app gets shut off for your rest period. That's what I think.
Thank you, Guy. So my one question, Dan, would be, is there an issue with somebody working 12 hours straight and having the Uber app and the Lyft app running concurrent at the same time, as long as they don't, bookend it and do 12 hours of Lyft and then jump on and do additional hours with Uber? Would you be okay with that running concurrent? My question.
just as that, it doesn't matter how you get to the 12 hours, just as long as at the 12th hour you stop. Whether it would be 8 hours for one and 4 hours for the other, that'd be fine. However, 12 hours is the max.
Does anybody
That's
else
the
have
law,
any?
then from the way
Yeah,
I'm
but see,
understanding.
there's no way to totally control how many hours they work. How would we do that? If they're working for both apps, how would they do that?
So Darren, Mark has his hand up. Maybe he can answer some of these questions.
Yeah, real quick though, Tracy, are we having an issue with our overflow room camera? It keeps blinking on and off.
Well, it's up now, but no one's in the room other than
Okay.
probably a PBOT employee. I can't see, maybe Christie's in there, but it's a non-issue, I think.
All right, perfect. Mr. Williams?
So, Dan, I agree with you in terms of the purpose for having a policy in place, the safety purpose for doing this. But I would encourage this committee to go back to the blueprint and figure out a different way to do it. Drivers work for multiple companies so that they can make ends meet. And what we really need to do is figure out a way using technology to prevent drivers from, for lack of better words, over driving. I'll give you an example. I may be a driver and I'm working for Radio Cab and I might put in 8 hours that day, but at the end of the day, Dan, you may want to hire me to drive a limousine because you've got an expensive, client that I need to pick up at the Moda Center. I wouldn't be able to do that for you the way this policy is currently structured. Every driver has a driver permit with the city of Portland. It's a unique number to that particular driver. If there was a way that companies could report the number of hours worked by that driver, okay, and associated with that driver's permit number, that would be one way we can meet the same objective, and it gives us a tool that we need in place to properly calculate the number of hours drivers are driving.
Mark, just out of curiosity, is Dan correct in the way that Uber is calculating hours? Is it only when people are in the car? It sounds to me like we would, if that's the case, we need to dial in the definition of how to calculate hours a little bit. And Allison, I see your hand raised. I know you want to probably talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, I work for Uber, so I can clarify that we actually calculate and track P1, P2, and P3. P1 is when we call it a shopping session when you're looking, and that is only tracked if the vehicle is moving. So those are all recorded.
So, but only if somebody's on the app in period 1 and sitting in a parking lot waiting for a call, you don't consider that as, that's not working in Uber's.
We have no way of knowing if they're on their couch or in a parking lot. You know what I mean? Like there's no indication that they're actually driving. So then
I want to be careful. I want to be careful on how I say this. So then Uber's idea is to just not count that regardless, rather than hold drivers responsible for the time they're on the app.
I'm not sure I understand the question. We're talking about the 12 hours on the road, right? Overuse.
Talking about 12 hours of work, regardless of if it's on the couch or on the road.
But with regard to this discussion, we're talking about
12-hour shift. However you want to work for Uber in 12 hours, if it's on your couch or on the road, we're talking about a 12-hour shift.
Well, yes, it's a 12-hour shift, yes, but we're talking about road usage. So for purposes of safety.
That's absolutely not what we're talking about. We're talking about 12 hours. However you want to define working for Uber for 12 hours, that's what we're talking about. Because I'll tell you right now, we've got taxi drivers all over town sitting in parking lots waiting for fares to come. And if you asked every single one of them in every taxi industry company, they're going to say they're working right now.
I understand that they're working. I'm saying for the purpose of this policy that we're discussing, my understanding is that there's a 12-hour limit for how long you are driving.
Okay,
And
so
that
that's
is
that's
tracked at-
exactly
can I
right, and
finish?
that's.
Can I
yeah,
finish
go
real
ahead.
quick?
Go ahead.
For how that is tracked at Uber to clarify, that is tracked on the road driving for P2 and 3.
Okay,
And
perfect.
P1 if it's moving.
Perfect. I'll go to Dan and then after that, you, Mark.
So what that means is you can drive out to the airport and sit there and wait for a fare, and you're not working until you get matched up and go underneath and pick somebody up. You work until you loop back around. All the hours that you sit out at the airport as an Uber or Lyft driver are not counted. But if you're a taxi driver, those hours are counted. You're actually working. You're sitting in that car. You're out there. So again, like I said, we need to address this. This is really fuzzy math. Fuzzy.
Mr. Williams?
So I will state again, just for the record, I would encourage this committee not to take action today. Clearly, we need to go back to the blueprint, and probably look at a couple of things now, it sounds like. But I do want to call out specifically in Portland City Code that it says maximum number of hours, no person shall provide private for hire service after driving. That's what it says in Portland City Code. So if there's a concern about the definition, this committee should probably look at making recommendations on revising that definition of driving for more than 12 hours in a 24-hour period. But it does say driving, doesn't say waiting, doesn't say standby. It specifically calls out driving.
Gotcha. Mr. Ocker?
Okay, first of all, how do you press the button to raise your hand on the screen? What do you do? I can't figure that out.
I would like to know that too.
Reactions
Okay.
at the bottom, reactions.
Yeah.
At the bottom?
Yeah, little smiley face looking at you.
Oh, okay, I got it. Okay. I have a question for the Lyft representative. How does Lyft calculate it? Are you online here?
Allison works for Uber, I believe. Is that who you wanted to talk to?
No, is there someone there from Lyft? Did someone say they were from Lyft?
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I thought so. Bobby, right?
Yep, I'm here. I
Bobby?
can't answer that question. I'm filling in for somebody right now, so I'm not familiar with the policy at all. But I'd be happy to follow up with somebody and get back to you.
Perfect.
Bobby, if you could follow up and send that information to Tracy.
Yeah, will do.
And Bobby, if you could send it to me and Camarina, because Camarina will track that along with the action items, and we'll put our emails in the chat to you.
Perfect. Thank you.
So is there any other questions or conversation around Dan's proposal for his topic submission? So what I would ask, I think this is one of those things that we can have assign kind of a subcommittee to discuss in greater detail how to come up with the answer to this. I think many of us agree that there's merit to this, but it's just the details. How about if we take, I'll tell you what, how about Mark, how about if we discuss how to create that subcommittee and bring it back? We'll reach out to people in between now and the next meeting and see if we can't start that up. If anybody has interest in serving on that subcommittee, send Tracy or Camarina an email showing interest, and we'll put that committee together. How does that sound? Any objections to that? Okay, so no objections.
And Darren, I want to verify, Dan, you said, Dan Mark, you said you were interested in that subcommittee?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
Perfect. Is that okay with everybody to not take action today, but set up a subcommittee?
Yeah, I think
no opposition to that.
You know, I think following what Mark said, the code is written pretty loose. And so I think what we should do is come up with a way to kind of tighten that up.
Okay. All right. So we are at the end of our agenda. However, I did want to mention, I wanted to bring up something. I don't remember what it was now. Maybe you guys get off easy. Yeah, so let's just call it good. We're done a half hour early, which is amazing. I appreciate everybody's time today. One thing that I know what I want to do. I want to go back to announcements. One of the things that has requested from Mr. Williams is that we move to a monthly meeting. And in our brief talk about that, we're probably going to do that starting in January. There's just too much that goes on in between to have this only 6 times a year. So that's the first thing. The other one is we're having conversations about combining the TNC driver committee and this committee and figuring out ways around that. So more to come on that. But with that being said, this committee is.
Darren, you have,
yeah.
Dan Mark has his hand up.
Oh, Dan Mark, you have your hand up.
Is there any way in the next meeting we can get an enforcement report? What's going on there?
Yes. We certainly can. All right. With that being said, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate your time today.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Bye, everybody. Bye.